Je sais. Mais dites-moi, vous avez été arrêté cette nuit?
Aucune importance.
Parfait. Chose promise.
Alain Delon is that definable thing, you know, which a lot of people claim for other people, but for Alain Delon, it's absolutely the truth. That is, he is an icon. He represents a world of filmmaking and a generation of films and an aura of style like nobody else.
Maman, mamie, mamou. Elle sait bien que je l'aime, ma petite Marge, et que je l'abandonnerai jamais pour suivre le vilain monsieur que papa m'a envoyé.
Alain Delon was an extraordinarily beautiful young man who became an extraordinarily good actor in a very quiet, self-contained, cool manner.
Isn't it great? It makes a beautiful picture, and I'm an artist with a camera, but what's the use? I have to live on tourists and tips.
Who tip best, American or German ladies?
An interesting question. English ladies, in fact, tip the best. But they are so serious, always so serious. They think that if you have just one conversazione, signor, just one, that you are bound to be loving them for life.
He had the proper status as an actor. I think in many respects, Delon is probably very highly regarded as an icon and quite underrated as a screen actor.
Ça vous ennuie pas de vous arrêter une seconde?
Ah, ça danse, hein? Je sais ce que c'est la liberté. Faudrait marcher un petit peu.
Ça va mieux?
Oui, ça ira, ça ira. C'est tout ensemble. L'air, l'oxygène, la liberté, tout ça, ça...
Alain Delon in the 60s was the superstar of European cinema, period. He was on people's walls. You would go into a dorm room and there would be a picture of Alain Delon.
You'd think he just spent 3 months on the Riviera. But for Respighi, none of us would be here. He kept us together, he kept us alive. True.
Scotty!
Well, historian, I suppose you'll be sending in that report to the General Staff now, huh?
I told you that was never Major de Clerfon's mission. Get that through your thick peasant's skull.
Basque peasant. Use my correct title.
Alain Delon's legacy, in many ways, is the French film industry as it is now. When he arrived, it was a struggling set of filmmakers and nothing really coherent. He brought to it something very French, but also something hugely international. There was an appeal to the way he looked and the way he acted, which could work anywhere.
Ça commence dans un train, ça se poursuit dans une chambre d'hôtel. Maintenant, on est dans une voiture de location et tout à l'heure, on va arriver dans une petite maison avec un frigidaire et de la bière dans le frigidaire.
Alain Delon was born in 1935 on the outskirts of Paris.
His father was Fabien, his mother was Edith, and what's very distinct in his life is that they split up when he was still a toddler, and he was almost abandoned at that age. He was sent off to live with foster parents, and as he put it, he felt he was an orphan. He'd been let loose and lived for a while with foster parents until they died. These must have been older foster parents. And then the parents sort of had to bring him back into the fold. But I think that by that stage, a certain sort of psychology had been set within him. And that began what was a very tough, very difficult, and very wild youth for him.
He was sent to a series of Catholic boarding schools where he was always in trouble and was expelled probably about 6 times. I think he sort of must have felt that he needed in himself some kind of discipline or some kind of structure to his life. So he joined the French Navy.
He was serving in the French Navy as a Fusilier Marine, a soldier on the ground during the Indochina War. He would say afterwards that of his time in service, of his 4 years in service, he would spend approximately a year in prison for insubordination. So it seems that the discipline wasn't drilled into him that he didn't have in the school. So eventually he was dishonorably discharged and found himself in Paris with no qualifications and nothing but a few years in the military behind him.
Somehow or other, he ended up in the Cannes Film Festival in 1957, where he was just hanging out, really. And he was spotted by Rock Hudson's agent, who thought that he had potential. He managed to get him a screen test with David O. Selznick. The result of that screen test was that Selznick actually offered him a 7-picture contract, as long on the proviso that he learned English, which of course he had no English at all. Delon, amazingly enough, turned him down because he didn't want to leave France, and if he was going to go into pictures or any way, then he wanted to do it in French.
Delon's screen debut would be in 1957's Quand la fin s'en mêle, directed by Yves Allagret. Allagret's brother, Marc Allagret, then gave Delon a small role in Sois belle et tais-toi, which also starred a young Jean-Paul Belmondo. Delon then became a star in France thanks to the success of the film Fable et Femme, and because of his highly publicized romance with Romy Schneider, with whom he co-starred in Christine. But his international breakthrough came when he played the role of Tom Ripley in director René Clément's Plein Soleil.
L'amour de Marge rend aveugle. Enlève mes affaires.
Je m'amusais.
Et mes chaussures aussi? Ça va pas?
Bon, bah, je vais voir à l'hôtel si j'ai du courrier.
C'est ça.
In 1960 comes Plein Soleil, the great masterpiece, René Clément. It is a version of the talented Mr. Ripley, and Delon plays Tom Ripley. It is not possible to explain the explosion of this picture. In fact, actually, this, I think, in many ways was the first time where the camera studied a man the way that the camera studies Delon, because usually in movies, the man is acting, he's action, he's moving. I mean, you can still be beautiful, but you're moving. The woman is the object of contemplation. This is Delon, and it's a very masculine contemplation as well. It was just a sensation, it's still a sensation.
Apart from being very good looking, he had a kind of depth to him in his performances, which suggested he wasn't quite what he seemed. That's what you always felt about Delon. He never gave much in the way of actually tropes, but at the same time, he suggested that underneath this cool exterior was something stirring. Well, that was right for Ripley, and the film was highly successful, especially in Europe.
After Plein Soleil, Delon was cast in the title role of Luchino Visconti's Rocco and His Brothers.
Non ci vedremo più, Nadia.
No, non è possibile. Non è possibile, Rocco. Ma se è questo che vuoi, ti giuro te ne pentirai. Te ne pentirai e sarà tardi. Ti odio, ti odio, ti odio, ti odio.
He was cast as Rocco in Rocco and His Brothers, a film that was based on a Thomas Mann book. It's kind of an anthology. It's about a group of brothers who come together after their father's death and move from the poor rural south of Italy up to the north. Rocco's story is one of innocence. He meets an ex-girlfriend of one of his brothers who is an ex-prostitute, and they fall for each other. They have a very pure romance, but it enrages his brother so much that his brother commits brutal acts, and eventually Rocco decides that he chooses his family over love. It's a very dark part, but it's quite beautiful in some ways, partly because of his innocence. He's very open, but he experiences terrible things.
Following Rocco and his brothers, Delon acted alongside fellow French superstar Brigitte Bardot in the anthology film Amour célèbre. But he was soon working with another celebrated Italian director, Michelangelo Antonioni, on L'Eclisse.
Silenzio. Pronto? Pronto? Ha aperto una Mediabanca 700. Prova a comprarne qualche centinaio. Di no!
Clearly the great directors were fascinated by this new creature on the block, because Michelangelo Antonioni then put him in L'Eclisse opposite Monica Vitti.
Delon plays a rich stockbroker with very little depth to him who falls for Monica Vitti. It's a film which caused a lot of controversy when it came out, because it was Antonioni's almost commercial film, but not really.
In some respects, it looks like a sort of a thriller made for Vogue magazine. It's absolutely gobsmackingly beautiful, it really is, but then Antonioni is wonderful at filming beautiful people. He loves beauty. So he's the perfect star for him, and put him up against Monica Vitti, who of course was her own had her own iconic status in Italian cinema, certainly. And you've got something that is completely irresistible.
Buonasera.
Sera.
Cosa stavi scrivendo?
Traduco un po' di roba dallo spagnolo.
Ah. E come si dice in spagnolo che vorrei salire da te?
Si dice che non puoi. Brutta lingua lo spagnolo, eh?
Io non capisco perché dobbiamo perdere il tempo così.
Neanch'io.
Vuoi vedere che è la mia?
In 1963, Alain Delon starred in the French comedy Any Number Can Win, alongside Jean Gabin.
Delon's next film, Any Number Can Win, was financed by the American studio MGM, and they weren't sure that he was the right guy for the role. He plays kind of the lieutenant of a crook who Delon is sent to a casino to open the way for a huge heist. The studio weren't convinced, but this was the kind of role he wanted to move into. So he did what later became known as the Delon method. And what he said was, don't pay me as much as you're paying other people, but give me the distribution rights to the movie in the French-speaking territories. This is someone who knows the hustle. He's got a keen eye for business. He's a great actor, but at the same time, he understands how to get what he wants, which is a role in this film. And as it turns out, he was paid 10 times when he finally finished with the distribution rights. He was paid 10 times what the other stars were paid, because he pulled off quite a spectacular coup. And this begins his love of business and the world outside movies, which he pursues with almost as much passion as his acting career.
After Any Number Can Win, Delon reunited with director Luchino Visconti for The Leopard, where he starred opposite Claudia Cardinali and Burt Lancaster.
Continúa. ¿Y después qué?
Te lo contaré todo. Tassoni.
Aldriguete, yo y algunos más intentamos echar la puerta abajo. Fue en vano. Entonces buscamos una viga en una casa bombardeada allí cerca. Y al fin, con un estruendo infernal, derribamos la puerta.
If there's one film that Delon should be really, really, truly proud of making, it is Visconti's The Leopard. The great film based on Giuseppe di Lampedusa's great book. Some say that it is the only example of a film based on a classic book that is actually better than the book. Burt Lancaster, Claudia Cardinali, a film set in the 19th century Sicily when the old aristocracy was starting to sort of crumble and a new age was coming, a new era.
At the time, people thought this was outrageous, it was hilarious. Burt Lancaster walking around in these clothes, he looked stiff, they dubbed him, the whole thing. People in Hollywood just screaming. Of course, now this film is considered a masterpiece, and the ballroom sequence is one of the great moments in cinema.
In 1965, Alain Delon starred in his first English-language production, The Yellow Rolls-Royce, as part of an all-star cast.
I'm going to get a cigar.
What's so funny?
Just that you show me so often the left side of your face. When you're right is even better. Of course you know that yourself. Because surely you're a film star.
I am not a film star. I'm not a film anything. I'm a hat-check girl in a nightclub in Miami. Any other questions?
Thank you. Full face, you're best of all.
It's a portmanteau film. There are three different stories in which this glorious yellow Rolls-Royce is passed on as the kind of the machine that drives the plot. And in the Delon story is that he's this, again, glamorous Italian photographer who encounters Shirley MacLaine, who is the mole of George C. Scott, who is a gangster figure from America. And it's all told in very kind of, archetypal terms, It's corny. And she starts this sort of passionate affair with Alain Delon because what other choice does she have? He's Alain Delon.
In the same year as the Yellow Rolls-Royce, Delon worked on another star-studded vehicle when he reunited with director René Clément on Is Paris Burning? Delon took on the role of future French Prime Minister Jacques Chabin-Delmas during the liberation of Paris in 1944.
Grâce à la trêve, nous avons obtenu, premièrement, de consacrer la reconnaissance de l'armée intérieure française dans Paris. Deuxièmement, de conserver les édifices que nous occupons. Vous savez parfaitement que la préfecture n'aurait pas pu tenir une heure de plus.
Faute de munitions. En avez-vous demandé?
La délégation a demandé à plusieurs reprises aux Alliés d'envoyer des armes et de pousser une pointe sur Paris. Elle n'a pas encore... Et le général Patton, que j'ai moi-même rencontré, ne m'a pas caché que le plan des Alliés était de faire tomber Paris par encerclement.
In René Clément's In Is Paris Burning, he plays one of the leading resistance fighters who helped to free Paris from the Nazis. The film was made in black and white, which was quite rare at the time, in order to make it more realistic. And it had a big cast list of people popping in and out of the picture. Delon had one of the leading roles and is excellent as this resistance fighter. And the film was enormously successful in Europe, where he was now a major star.
Following Is Paris Burning, Delon returned to English-language films, first with Texas Across the River, where he co-starred with Dean Martin, and then with Lost Command, which saw him share the screen once more with Claudia Cardinali.
It's a bitter war. The Algerians want independence. The heroes of the French Revolution wouldn't be very proud of you.
You haven't touched your whiskey.
I don't drink whiskey. I only ordered it to be fresh. I'm very fresh. I'm going to ask you to see me home in your jeep.
I'm a foot soldier taking a tour of Algiers on foot.
I'll tell you what. I'll show you the city, but then you must drop me off in a taxi.
Okay, you drive a hard bargain.
Lost Command is 1966, a Mark Robson picture, another one of those cast of thousands. Anthony Quinn, also on the French side, is Michel Morgan, the great Michel Morgan. Claudia Cardinale is in it again, and Alain Delon plays a French officer.
It starts at the end of the war in Indochina, and of course, which is something that he had personal experience of. So I suspect that's one of the reasons he wanted to do it. After that, it moves into, rather more urgently and rather more politically, into the battle with Algeria. And this is very controversial for French actors to make. The very fact that he actually wanted to do this, and I think, and has carried it off extremely well, shows that, amongst other things, amongst his great looks, amongst all the things that he had naturally, he had great courage as well.
I take it the young lady's with you, sir?
That's right, Geoffrey.
I'm sorry, sir, you can't go into the Casbah. You're not armed. If you can wait a moment, I will call a patrol to escort you.
Please don't bother. I'll be fine.
Aisha? I'd like to see you again.
Okay. Day after tomorrow. Same time, same place. Captain Esclavier. And thank you.
In 1968, Alain Delon starred as a hitman in director Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Samouraï.
The single film for me that sums up Delon is Le Samouraï. It's one of those great crime thrillers that do something entirely different. It's a film that absorbs all the kind of pristine cool that had come from Italy and European art film and applies it to the mythology of the crime film.
The film was certainly highly influential. It was such a cool film, and Delon was so cool in his performance. It was a completely different kind of thriller.
Vous restez là jusqu'à quelle heure?
On a loué la chambre pour la nuit.
Je serai là à 2 heures, gardez-moi une place.
Apporte de l'argent si tu perdais.
Je ne perds jamais. Jamais vraiment.
After the success of Le Samouraï, Delon began work on Farewell Friend, which saw him paired up with Charles Bronson.
You know, my first gun was even bigger than this. I was just a kid then, and I could hardly lift the damn thing. And that's when I lost my first war, too. When I pick a side, you can bet the other side is going to win. Anyhow, it's a job with a future. There are plenty of wars to be lost. Doc, I got a line to the Congo. Come with me.
I already answered that one, Pop.
There'll be 15 of us. Radio man, medic, everything. But we need a doctor. We split everything at the end. And who knows? At the end, there might not be 15 of us left.
(1968) is Farewell Friend. It is a movie with Charles Bronson, and it's important to say that because Alain Delon was looking for an American to play the part. He's such a savvy guy in terms of the business. He knew, like, let me find American. He had seen Bronson in a couple of things. He also knew that the French love American sort of tough guys, gangsters. They really like that, especially, you know, in the whole stereotypical thing. It's again about male friendship, massive hit in France. And the Delon is a very canny guy. He knew this was going to happen, and it's a big success.
The interplay between them is very, very electric. It's very dynamic. And they'll play with each other again and again across their careers. There's something that fizzes on screen that you can see. They really get each other. They really understand how to work with each other.
In 1969, Delon starred in director Jacques Daray's La Piscine, opposite Romy Schneider and Jane Birkin.
Guess who it was?
Who cares?
It was Harry.
Is he around here?
Yes.
Anytime you hide someplace, the first call you get, it's him.
He's with his daughter, showing her the Riviera.
He's got a daughter?
So it seems.
He never mentioned her to me.
Me neither.
La Piscine, the swimming pool, is one of the most intriguing films he ever made. Jacques Deray directed this. It is shimmeringly erotic. It's a very simple story. A couple who've been together about 2 years, Alain Delon and Romy Schneider, are living in a borrowed house on the Côte d'Azur. Wonderful house with a huge swimming pool. And then they get an unexpected arrival in an old friend of Delon's and also the ex-lover of Romy Schneider and his teenage daughter, played by Jane Birkin. This, of course, precipitates a crisis. The problem is that Delon's character is an ex-alcoholic, and one night the father gets completely trashed and drunk, and he falls into the swimming pool. He can't swim. Delon starts having a drink as well, and over the arguments and through it, Delon drowns him in the pool, murders him. What happens after that is just extraordinary, because they sort of cover it up. It's one of those films that really only the French could make and get away with. I have to say, it is absolutely extraordinarily beautiful to look at, and verging, I think, on a masterpiece.
During the filming of La Piscine, Delon became involved in a real-life criminal affair when his friend and former bodyguard Stefan Markovitch was found murdered, causing an enormous press sensation.
It had always kind of been there in the background that he had dubious contact, shall we say, with the French criminal underworld, that he had dodgy friends. And this rose to the surface when a body was found in a Versailles rubbish dump belonging to Stefan the Bull Markovitch, clearly not a man of great repute. He was never convicted of anything, but it kind of dogged him.
No one ever knew who was responsible for the murder, and no one probably ever will. But since then, Delon has always been thought of as someone with pretty bad associations with the underworld, which he really got from when he was very young and probably never entirely shook off. But it didn't make any difference to his acting. In his next few films, he was still the major star in Europe.
Despite his connections to real-life criminals, Delon then starred in a series of gangster films, including Jeff, The Sicilian Clan, and Borsellino, where he appeared alongside fellow French star Jean-Paul Belmondo.
Borsellino, which is again directed by Jacques Deray, I suppose you could call the French equivalent of The Godfather.
The film was set in Marseille, where Delon said afterwards that really Marseille was the Chicago of France. And anything that happened in Chicago was mirrored exactly in Marseille, drug dealings and criminal activities. So it was quite a realist study of crime in Marseille.
It's the story of two young men, played by Jean-Paul Belmondo and Alain Delon, a fantastic pairing of two French icons who didn't get on at all. And it's sort of their kind of climb up through the tiers of the underworld, all sort of depicted with a great precision and a great kind of aesthetic detail. This is Paramount money was involved, so it was a big budget occasion, and an attempt to match Americans at their own game.
Following Borsellino, Delon returned to director Jean-Pierre Melville for Le Cercle Rouge and reunited with Charles Bronson in the western Red Sun, which also featured Toshiro Mifune.
Hold it, Link. Now just take off your belt one-handed.
This is when you turn bounty hunter still.
Since the price went up on you.
Looks like it worked. Yeah, he always was stupid. Now jump!
What, me? Scum!
It's a film that, deserves, to be seen by everybody in the world simply because of what it is. Here you have Terence Young, the man who directed the early Bond films, making something of a spaghetti western that involves Charles Bronson, a star of Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West, being betrayed by his partner, played by Alain Delon, Le Samurai, coolest guy in Europe, because they're doing a heist on a train in which the Japanese ambassador is traveling with two of his bodyguards, one of whom is Toshiro Mifune, one of the Seven Samurai. It's this wonderful cluttered collection of the coolest things in cinema thrown together, and for that very reason you have to see it.
Alain Delon returned to the role of a hitman and reunited on screen with Burt Lancaster for 1973's Scorpio.
Police were distracted by the rooftop assassin, another shot from the darkness of the airport, and Salon Zem falls dead.
Delon can easily play assassins, and he plays another assassin, a CIA-trained assassin, in Scorpio. It's a cold film. It has the most astonishingly dark ending to it, but with characters like that, and of course Delon had worked with Lancaster before in The Leopard, then at least you're going to have good performances. In this case, you get good performances in a really, really interesting political thriller.
Following Scorpio, Delon returned to French film and appeared alongside Jean Gabin and a young Gérard Depardieu in Two Men in Town.
Pareil que t'as des idées?
Des idées? Non.
Alors?
Tu vois pas qu'il te fait marcher?
Je préfère. Ou alors je me suis pas dérangé pour rien.
Je crois que si. Vous êtes tous dérangés pour rien.
Ça me plaît pas beaucoup.
C'est regrettable.
Mais t'as pas confiance en nous, tu te dégonfles.
Je veux plus toucher à rien, c'est simple. Question d'âge.
Tu t'es ramolli, camarade?
Sans doute.
1973 is Deux Hommes dans la Ville, which is Two Men in Town, and it is basically a cri de coeur against the death penalty, which was really what people were taking up in France at that time.
Jean Gabin is an ex-criminal who's now a sort of parole officer. He's the one who looks after former criminals. And he takes Alain Delon under his wing, who has just come out of jail. The detective who actually put him away thinks that he is still going to commit crimes. He sort of, he goads him, he's constantly goading him. He's also got his old gang trying to get him, dragging him back into the world of crime. Delon himself actually wants to go straight, but he finds it a struggle with all these pressures on him. It's beautifully done, and The two of them, Gabin and Delon, are just wonderful together. It is a film that has a real heart to it, a real passion about the subject matter, and one that is actually genuinely heartbreaking.
Bonjour. Je disais, qu'est-ce que vous devenez? Ça fait des mois que vous êtes ici et on vous voit jamais. C'est avec mon frère? C'est vrai?
Promis.
C'est là que je l'ai vu revivre.
In 1975, Alain Delon put on The Mask of Zorro.
The murder of Brother Francisco releases me from the promise I made to another man of peace. Who you butchered. It's easy to kill saints, Colonel! Let's see how you do against a sinner.
Zorro's been filmed a million times. Various actors have essayed the role of Don Diego de la Vega, the great sort of Spanish nobleman turned freedom fighter. In 1975, Alain Delon had a go at it, and guess what? He's just fantastic. He's wonderful. I have to say it's a very lightweight version of Zorro. It's not the Tyrone Power one, or even perhaps the latest one, but it does exactly what it's supposed to do in the package. It's enormous fun. He is very swashbuckling in it, and he can carry off, you know, the black cloak and the mask and the hat with a great deal of aplomb, actually.
Following Zorro, Delon worked with director Joseph Losey on Monsieur Klein.
Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour, monsieur. Je vous remercie. Voilà, j'ai téléphoné tout à l'heure. Ce matin, j'ai reçu votre journal, adressé à mon nom. Or, je ne suis pas abonné, et je n'ai pas du tout l'intention... Enfin, je n'ai aucune raison de l'être, voilà. Votre journal ne se vend que par abonnement, je crois.
Oui. C'est le seul moyen dont nous disposons pour informer la communauté des réunions, des décisions, des différentes dispositions des autorités.
Et j'entends bien, mais je ne fais pas partie de votre...
Oui, oui. Oui, je comprends. C'est bizarre.
This film for me, Monsieur Klein, Mr. Klein, is to me the crown of Alain Delon's career. This is probably his greatest role in many, many ways. On the surface, it's the story of a man who gets caught up in mistaken identity in the worst possible circumstances that you can imagine. He's mistaken for a Jewish man during what's known as the Rafle, the roundup of the Jews by the Nazis in the early part of the 1940s. He gets caught up in it. His character is out to sort of, he was stealing from this community, and he winds up actually being caught in this community. The last scene, the last shot of Delon in it, I defy anybody to look at this and not be moved. It is an immense, immense piece of acting. And Losey shoots it in shadows, in the dark. It is deeply interior, and you watch Delon start off as a thief, basically, and he is redeemed, and you watch the process of the redemption, and it's incredible. And he's nominated for the César for this because it is a great film. To me, it's my favorite of his, and he's wonderful in it.
In the late 1970s, Delon starred in a series of French crime films, which he also produced, including Le Gang, Attention les enfants regardants, and Mort d'une Purie, or Death of a Corrupt Man.
Notre bulletin d'information. Ce matin, le député Michel Serrano a été découvert mort dans son bureau.
Ce soir, on se voit.
Les premières constatations laissent à penser qu'il s'agit d'un meurtre, mais laissons tout d'abord la parole à un témoin que notre reporter a réussi à interroger.
Monsieur Gonzalez, vous êtes le laveur de carreaux. Ouais, je lave les carreaux, quoi.
Death of a Corrupt Man is a film directed by Georges Lautner. It's got Alain Delon caught up in a web which is both criminal and political. But he plays it with the kind of confidence that you very rarely find in those things. He's caught up in something that is beyond him, but he's got control of the situation in a way that reassures and takes us with him. You could be alienated by this film. You could find it too chaotic and too uncertain. But there's something about Delon guiding you through it with Lautner's expert hand that really works.
As the 1980s began, Delon continued to star in crime thrillers before taking a very unexpected role with 1984's Our Story.
La scène se passe dans une chambre d'hôtel Terminus. J'adore les chambres d'hôtel Terminus. D'ailleurs, je me demande vraiment pourquoi on se fait chier à avoir des triplex et des résidences secondaires alors qu'on est si bien dans une chambre d'hôtel Terminus. Tiens, si c'était à refaire, je crois que je bougerais pas d'ici. Et je regarderais passer les trains.
Our Story is one of those films that seems designed to focus on one single performance. That single performance is Alain Delon's. Bertrand Blier's film is one of obsession, and it's one of degeneration and despair. And what it is, I think, is an alcoholic's nightmare made flesh into a film. Delon pulls that off extraordinarily well without actually overplaying it. In fact, you really, really feel for him, even in the depths of his desperation. He is the key to the success of the film. It is a brave thing for him to do because it shows him really, really cracking up. And as a result of his performance, when he pretty well carries the film, he won the César Award for Best Actor.
After Our Story, Delon returned to crime films in the twilight of his career and also took on the role of an aging Casanova. One of his final roles was as Julius Caesar in Asterix at the Olympic Games. In 2019, he received a Palme d'Or award, honouring his remarkable career in cinema.
He commanded the screen in everything he played in, really, and he played with some of the best European directors. So he was a remarkable guy.
He was astonishingly beautiful, and the camera adored him. And directors made such fabulous use of that. But he was also just a fabulously elusive actor, and that made him enormously fascinating.
It doesn't often come along that you get someone that beautiful who can actually also act as well as he can. He is a true French icon, and he's a true icon of international cinema.
He could work with any actor from any tradition, he could tell any story, but he kept it French. He was resolutely telling French stories, telling stories quite often that he'd lived in some way. There's something about him, about the way he portrays parts, about the way he carries himself, that changed the way a hero in a movie will be.
It was the first time, actually, in the cinema for a leading man to be contemplated by the camera the way that Delon was and is. And you have to see Plein Soleil, you have to see all of that to understand it. If you care about the cinema, you have to know Le Samouraï, and you must know Alain Delon.